Welcome everybody to the next part in the series. I won't be talking much this time because I'm going to be mostly painting the model, uh, texture painting it, and I'll go over some things, but I'm mostly going to speed over it because I spent a long time painting it. So, uh, just earlier, I went into weight paint mode and I demonstrated applying an entire area of influence using the vertex groups by selecting an entire area from the using the trying to remember what it's called, the masking, and you go to the vertex groups and select apply. Now you would have to do this for the entire model if you selected parent with empty groups, and that's a very tedious process, which is why I would recommend you parent it with automatic weights, so that way you can just it's already done most of the painting for you. All you have to do is make the finer edits. Now, before I texture paint, I'm doing something very important uh, that will help you significantly when you're going to paint something. I am doing what's called marking seams, which you can access the menu by pressing Control E, and then you'll have to there's an option there's like mark sharp, mark seam. You want to select mark seam, and when you do, it'll turn your edges red like that. And what that does is it separates your parts of your model into kind of like sections. So that way, when you unwrap it, it unwraps uh, those parts of your models into the sections that you uh, mark the seams. Because you do not want one important reason you want to mark seams is if you're going to paint a model like I do, you don't want overlapping seams, uh, sections, because th this this will cause your not your weight painting, your texture painting to it won't paint properly. Instead of painting where you want it to, it's going to either paint a different section or it's going to paint the whole entire model. I experienced those problems on my first model, when all I did was UV unwrap it, and I went through the different UV unwrap options, and none of them actually helped me because I didn't know what I was doing, and it was just a mess. I went online trying to find some help on it, and nobody actually had anything on it. Now, I actually learned how to UV unwrap from Darren Lyle's UV unwrap tutorial. He's a really cool guy when it comes to learning things quickly about Blender. I'm basically I'm doing what anybody would do in Blender when you UV unwrap something, but I know how to do this because of Darren Lyle. So I really recommend seeing his tutorial. I mean, it's a really simple process, but for like for the sake of contributing uh, um, to his effort to make the video, it's the small things that make a difference, and his video made a difference for me. So I would highly recommend going to see it because it is worth watching him explain it. And you never know, he might say something that I didn't, and you might learn something in the process too. It's always worth checking things out. So right now, I'm doing exactly what I said was good to do. I'm basically marking seams to create sections. And like the chest area, from the chest uh, to the waistline, you could make that an entire section, because it just takes all of your UVs from inside the seams, and it just kind of like flattens them out. As long as you have a seam in the back, like I do around his shoulders and his buttocks, it'll make an entire, like, it'll make it a torso and an abdominal. You'll see in a bit, and it's just really useful. And you wanna be you wanna make sure you get areas like the fingers, the toes, because that'll just be a big mess of UVs that you do not want. It is very important to do that, because if you're going to paint the fingers, then just like any other phase of the modeling process, you want to be tedious, you want to be careful. So I pretty much do that. Yeah, I'm about to do it in a moment. So you could honestly mark seams however you want. Uh, this is just my method. I was just quickly going in there and marking seams, uh, just to get it done and over with. And th and another thing too, uh, you could like mark very specific seams. Like you could mark around the arms, the tails, and then like the neck, and then you could unwrap that. But like then you'd have this problem with overlapping seams, because the object is round, and you're trying to paint a round object, and that's not going to take the paint properly. So you don't, like I said, you don't want to have any overlapping UVs. You want to make things flat. Now, my problem here that I encountered with these UVs that you saw me resizing, I actually don't know what the problem is. I tried searching all over my model for where those UVs might be, and I didn't see them. I played around with the texturing, and I set them right in the eye deliberately just to find the UVs, and I could not find them. So obviously they were a glitch, or maybe they were duplicate UVs that were like in the smallest crevice of your model that nobody will ever see, and you probably would never see either. It doesn't really matter. You could just like, if they have absolutely no apparent influence, what you can do is you can move them off of your texture, so you have more space on your texture to work with. Just remember to use the correct texture, or create the texture that you need. Right now I am doing just that. I was just using the eye for a test, and I clicked and dragged down to change the dimension, both of the dimensions of the model. And see, you wanna make sure everything's spaced from itself, because the painting can be a very tedious process, and it comes with its own set of complications. And you will have to switch between the 3D view and the UV image editor. And Another thing that's extremely important: always save the changes to your texture, and make sure to save your texture as an image, because Blender will not preserve your texture, so you will need to save it to a file. If you quit Blender, you will lose your file. Well, it will not preserve the texture. Now, normally in here, in the texture paint panel, you'd have to insert a slot, which you could do, and then you'll be asked to, well, you won't be asked, but you'll have to select a material slot. I normally select diffuse, and then to paint on the texture of the model, you want to find the paint mode in the texture paint toolbar, and then, or like in the slots. I believe it's in the slots. I don't think it's in the toolbar. You want to find that, and to make things easier, you set the paint mode to texture paint, or no, you set the paint mode to texture, and then depending on what you're painting, take for example, I'm painting the body. I made a texture specifically for the body. You're going to have to set the canvas to the texture you made for that particular area that you are going to paint. And that's pretty much what I do the whole time. Blender's paint system isn't, I wouldn't say it's a replacement for a normal photo editing program, but if you just paint using the opacity, different levels of opacity, and different brushes and different strengths, you've got the basics. As long as it doesn't have any filters, it doesn't have any manipulation tools, and you don't really need those unless you do in this situation, because a lot of people, they don't paint their models, they apply actual textures. I personally like to paint my model because I have a lot of fun painting, except for when I encounter problems, which I will show you in a minute. That's just my personal preference. You could do whatever you want. You could go online and find a free texture, or maybe if you have the money, you could buy a texture. I don't know of anybody who buys texture. And like I said before, Andrew Price promotes a website that takes pictures of everything, and he actually also promotes websites that have textures, free textures, and he mentions that he goes to those websites a lot to use those textures. So it's whatever you want to do. It's your style, uniquely your unique system is of you, as I call it. Now, one thing about painting in the texture paint mode and using the masking is, if you have a certain number of UVs selected and you're just painting away, and you're painting near the edges of the faces or the mask, then you're going to encounter what digital painters call hard edges, and that's when the edges do not blend in with the rest of the canvas. It's just hard like that. There's no like a fuzzy, there's no fuzzy shading. It's just hard, and unless you're going for that, you're going to have to be considerate and select maybe depending on what you're painting, select more UVs than you think you'd need, so that way you don't have to go back and do all that. Because that's the issue I encountered here. I didn't select more UVs than I needed, and the edges remained hard until I went to fix all that. So I will just speed this up until we get to the next part I need to discuss. And here we are to a place we really needed to be. These problematic seams. You can spend a lot of time trying to fix these particular problems. I think the best way to fix these problems would be to have a higher level of subdivisions, because I never was able to clean up all of these seams, even if I was working, regardless if I was working in the 3D view or the UV image editor. These seams are very problematic, and they could appear anywhere they want, and that is, put simply, quite annoying if you're just wanting to get it done. Like, why can't it be simple? Well, sometimes it just can't be, you know? I spent a long time trying to angle the model, or the view of the model anyway, just to try and correct these seams, cover them up. But even when I used a different color of paint, the only color that actually worked was the color of the seams. And because I obviously didn't want that, they were small seams anyway. They were like in the neck area anyway, so nobody was going to notice, because who's going to look for seams on a model when the actual focal point is more of, unless you're going to focus the render on like the head area, and you're making like a head shot or a bust. If anything, worst case scenario, you could just pop the rendered result into a photo editor, and you can just paint over those problems, and nobody will ever notice, as long as you use the correct paint, of course. Now, here what I did, this is the other side of his face. I do not recommend doing that, because I encountered problems that made the process a little bit longer. But in case you want to do it anyway, because simplicity, what I did was I selected the faces in UV image editor. I adjusted the frame I was on in the timeline, because I was tired of seeing it set to like a certain frame. It's annoying when you don't see it to 0. It's kind of like an OCD problem for me. I'm not working on any animation, so you don't need to care about the timeline at all. But anyway, when you're working in even when I was working in the UV image editor, I wasn't able to fix the problem, but you could just as easily fix the problem in a photo editor. I personally use GIMP 2.0. I have been since 2013. It's been my little painting buddy. My friends have constantly, like, my other artist friends who like take commissions for what they do, they constantly recommend paint tool and I don't have the money for anything, actually. So, but I do have the trial for paint tool. Now they have mentioned Pirate Bay, but I'm not one who's interested in pirating the software. I feel like I have to earn it to use it, so that was completely out of the option. So enough of that. I guess you could say in edit mode. Well, in Blender, it's kind of impossible to fix the seams with a light color. If you use like a dark color such as brown or black, then you might make the seams disappear, because that's pretty much what happened when I painted the nose in, and the nose had some bad seams around the area, and they just disappeared with the painting of the black. Now, it's important not to exclude painting in the UV image editor from your session, because you can check the symmetry of your colors, basically. Like the shoulder area, it might look like it's perfectly symmetric from the 3D view, but you go to the UV image editor, as I did, and you'll actually notice that it's actually quite the contrary. So all I'm doing here is trying to fix seams. Now, another potential possibility to fix seams is to adjust the faces, and that's why I said that I do not recommend copying the vertices and then mirroring them with Shift M, because then you're trying to correct two at once. And that, like I said, that's a complicated process that you just don't want to be involved with. Like, I encountered more problems than I needed to when I mirrored those vertices and set them on top of the other side of the face. And I spent like, I'd say about 30 minutes trying to work out that little problem, as you can see there, by mirroring the vertices. You can do it. Like, with hands, you could probably do it. But with a face, I personally don't recommend it. Like, you can do it. I'm not saying that you can't do it. It's just that there are potential for more problems than you will need. So, at the moment, I am just adjusting things. So, well, the rest of this is mostly just painting. Painting. I painted for quite some time. It's a really simple process. It's very basic. Now remember that you can go online and you can download more brushes. I personally have yet to do that, but I'm personally fine with the brushes that I personally am working with. But it's an option, and you can go and check that out. So I am just going to speed this up, because all I'm going to do is try and fix seams and paint the rest of the model and fix my own mistakes. And one last reminder, remember to change up the size of the brush and the opacity. You want to like change it to the opacity. You want to lower that to a point where you can actually shade with your paintbrush. That is extremely useful, and it's much easier than using a fuzzy brush, which basically what digital artists would say, feather the edges. Or maybe that's just me. I use that term because it's an actual term when you're painting. So, yeah, I haven't actually heard anybody use that term before, so maybe I'm the first. So, I'm going to speed this up now. kind of.
Sleep till I come home. Dream of something sweet. I won't be there.
I'd like to note about the paint bucket. It doesn't work like the paint bucket in a photo manipulation, like say GIMP, Photoshop, any digital paint program. It instead of paint filling sections with different colors of paint being the borders, it will actually fill an entire area on the of the same. It'll fill an entire area basically, and it'll ignore all the color barriers unless there's settings for the bucket that I missed. Even if you set the opacity to a lower level, it will basically paint over all of your work. So you have to be careful, because with my computer, it'll, if I have a solid color with 100% opacity, it will lag my computer, and it'll paint the whole thing, and I'll just end up hitting Control Z anyways, because that's not something I want or need. So just be careful when you're using the bucket tool. Now, it's most useful if you're going to use the masking feature when you're texture painting, because you can paint an entire mask, or fill an entire masked vertice. That's where I found the best use for it. And in case I didn't mention this before, regardless if you're in sculpt mode, paint, texture paint, I haven't used vertex paint yet, or weight paint, you can adjust the size of your brush without needing to access the toolbar by pressing F, and then you can move your mouse to adjust the size of your brush. And remember that you can hide both of the menus by pressing T to hide your toolbar, and Shift F to hide your properties toolbar, which will also hide the timeline. Edit the mode select toolbar, well, the 3D view toolbar will still be there though, but like you'll have an entire area. And remember that there's a full screen option when you select window, and that just basically brings Blender's interface to the full screen. You won't see the minimize or exit bar or your taskbar, depending on your operating system. Just use taskbar for simplicity. So yeah, just a little factoid. I'm going to speed this up now.
Dream of something sweet. I won't be there soon to wake you so discreet.
One last little factoid before I end this session. You'll notice that this weird line that appeared when I was painting the hard edges. Apparently, even with, uh, I guess you could say, nearly perfectly painted model, there are the occasional glitches that would appear even in a that would normally appear in a like crazy UV painted model. I don't understand the glitch. Uh, like I was using brown paint and somehow the black paint just like glitched across the model, and it even glitched across in the UV image editor. I don't know what that's about. But for me, it was a super quick fix. I just undid everything that I did, and it messed it up when I used the uh, bucket, and it messed the face up when I used the bucket, and I have absolutely no idea how. Because you can clearly see that we were nowhere near the face, but it messed up the face anyway. So, uh, and another thing, the grease pencil. Don't know if I've elaborated on this before. It's really easy to use. It's always like the bottom tab of each mode, and all you do is like you can select draw. I normally have the I normally check the box constant draw, and I have, if I want to draw on a model, like I want to mark a specific area that I want to keep track of, I'll select the the contact area to surface, because keeping it to view can be frustrating, because sometimes it sets the actual drawing like way off. Like you could draw it on one side of the head and it'd be on the other side of the head. So if you're going to be painting, well, drawing with the grease pencil on a model, then I recommend using the surface. And that is about it. I am just going to speed it through this painting process, and then we will go to the next phase of this entire thing. So I will just talk to you again right then.